Hello and welcome to this very exciting series. I am Dr. Tatiana Irvin and I am going to be your guide, your facilitator, and one that will invoke your greatest intuition during this series. I am involved and have been for many years in energy and medical intuition, both as a coach one-on-one as well as inspiring students through a various program of protocols and entrainment that awaken their latent intuition. I also seek to awaken the greater populace through Waking Up Solutionary TV with Dr. Tatiana. This particular series is all about awakened intuition as a path to enlightenment. It is an introduction to our latent empathic abilities as a tool for soulful transformation, and I'm so excited that you decided to join us. Let's go ahead and begin. We are born of and are inheritors of full faculties as embodied divinity. And what everyone needs to know is that as a fractalization of the divine spark that is the one infinite creator, the one prime mover, the one central universal force, we are truly and unquestionably divinity and inheritors of every aspect of growth, opportunity, and co-creative individuality that is from the very beginning the intention of creation, one source growing outward. Understanding this principle as a premier and a fundamental concept is of great significance in moving forward in knowing how to claim our abilities. Human consciousness began with an unspoken knowing of our connectedness to all things. If you look at nature, if you look at small children, particularly children in the indigenous world, you will discover that there is a sense of connectedness to everything. The animals, the plants, the insect life, the flora, the fauna, and natural man understands that we are all connected, understands that we are all part of one moving force of co-creation, and that the nature of the universe is collaboration, not competition. With this sense of oneness and this fractalized divinity, each of us are inherently imbued with the access to the four clairs. And let's be honest, there's far more than only four clairs. But let's start with the first four that are the most commonly referred to. Clairaudient, which many of you understand to be hearing, auditorily or internal, our internal ears, hearing things that we couldn't possibly have access to. Inner awarenesses, inner information. Next would be clairvoyant, being able to see things that are not immediately in front of our visual acuity, not immediately externally outside of us and being seen through our eyes, through the cones, the rods, the lenses. We can see through a building. We can see into someone's body. We can see more than what our five senses would have told us we could in terms of using our eyes. The next most common clair is clairsentience. It's a sense of simply being connected to all things, recognizing that you are one with all things, which is really fundamental to this lesson, as well as this entrainment from the get-go. Understanding that I am one with other things means that I can feel sometimes outside of my being and into what might seem like the individuation of a person, a plant, an animal, a place. Clairsentience. The next that is the most common is claircognizant. Have you ever noticed that you know things sometimes that no one told you, that you simply can't place as if it came to you from the ethers? It's because it did. Claircognizance is all about receiving what I like to refer to as divine data download, or D-cubed. Very exciting when information just becomes metamorphosized into our being, into our understanding, and made available to us. Other magic likened unto a superhero. This is exciting because there are so many things that we can do, from levitation, from being able to grid the entire globe and the cosmos using remote viewing and using astral projection, the ability to embody our multidimensionality, the ability to fly and understand that we are not locked into one density or dimension. All of these become open doors when we step into our intuitive abilities. What happens to us when we come into this third dimension or third density with a veil of forgetfulness? Well, we develop energetic filters to better cope with overstimulation. Because if we are available at 100% all stimulation coming at us at all times, we would experience something that many of us have witnessed before with those that are suffering with autism. Overstimulation is all data coming at us very often at a consistent and equally intense frequency. It's too much information, and we develop filters, both for our own protection and sometimes in ways that don't work for us, and we will move on and catch on that in just a moment. Familial and societal impact creates layers and filters for self-preservation, and we need to touch on this. Why? Because we are always going to be experiencing a superimposition of the environment for which we started our lives. The families that we chose, the bodies that we decided to experience through, the DNA that made up that body, the cellular memory of our mother, of our father, of our ancestors. Very often these play a tremendous role in how we experience embodied divinity in this 3D sphere. But we have to recognize that some of these filters are not always going to be of service to us in a long-term way. We may learn how to tune others out and experience something called dissonance, detachment. In other cases, we may feel so understood when it comes to our fears of things that we feel that are real around us and are still not filtered too, like the boogeyman. You know, what is in the closet? What's under the bed? What is in what I cannot see with my cones and rods that I feel clairsentient connection to that may be terrifying me? To help every child move forward, most cases we experience some sort of societal or familial filtering. We create layers of filters based on our cultural values. This is just a simple demonstration, but if we look at Eastern versus Western mindsets on what is considered traditionally valuable, what is considered culturally attributable to a sense of solid oneness or individuality, we can see that they are not consistent from one region of the world to the other. For instance, in the Eastern mindset and in their culture and tradition, harmony with other people and cooperation is more valued. We'll find that families generationally will live in the same home and will repeat that process, whereas in the West, self-sufficiency and self-esteem and self-worth and self-focus is far more valued. How have you launched? How have you managed to make it in the world? Relationships and building community and collaboration in the Eastern world is very often more valued over the Western model of personal autonomy. Balance with ecology and creating more sustainable systems is far more popular in the East, whereas in the West it's more about efficiency and how quickly can we spin out that product or that service regardless of our current earth needs and all of those sentient life that will be impacted by a particular service or product. In the Eastern world, we keep the outer world constant, and we're about conformity, whereas in the Western world, we're looking at altered states of consciousness and individuation, and again, a personal worldview. Freedom of inner experience, a variety of inner experience, is more popular within the Eastern model, whereas within the Western model, we're much more expression externally. We're looking for variety, we're looking for a lack of predictability, we're looking to be challenged. Versus individual protective layers comes up in this as well. Individualism versus collectivism, informality versus formality, competition versus cooperation, egalitarianism versus hierarchy, the use of time, the passage of time, change and future, tradition and the past, action orientation, being orientation, practicality and idealism. Take a look at all of these because these have formed your values. Why are they important? Because they are the lens through which you see the world. And your worldview and how you are co-creating as individuated divinity is always going to be filtered through these prejudiced belief systems. And if we don't examine these belief systems, then we start to create a stagnancy or a repetitivism with which we are able to co-create. And until we look at these, examine them, reflect, and see what's serving us and what is no longer serving us, we can't move forward to create anew. Very important in reclaiming your latent intuition and embodying more of your multidimensional being. Our original personal and social perspective can become disassociative and rigid if there is too much in the realm of conformity. If we are labeled and we are slotted into predictable and rigid patterns of what is expected of us in our given culture, tradition, and society, there becomes a lack of individuation, a lack of creativity, and very often a dumbing down of our own personal creative brilliance. We are often taught to forget what it is that motivated us as children, how we saw the world through a fresh perspective. How often we knew from a place of solar plexus, understanding the chakras and how they work, that this was the I am, I feel, I desire, I am inspired by. We very often come into a world that isn't necessarily immediately open to our own unique contributions. And in first world societies where we experience an academic portfolio that demands of us certain criteria, certain performance, a lot of the creative aspects of our individuation is not very often featured, particularly in the public school system. So many of us forget to ask what it is that inspires us, what it is we wanted to learn, what our own unique and creative contributions were going to be. And very often we forget ourselves, we forget what motivates us, and we forget what we came here to share. Yes, we are often taught to conform. Conformity is something that we need to examine again and again and again, because what we are teaching in this very entrainment is for you to question on its head and as a principle that conformity was never something that served humanity. Cooperation and collaboration, yes, but conformity dams your creativity. And if the current status quo is that we are not intelligent divinity, but instead simply biological meat suits completely incapable of anything past the five senses, conformity must be examined, it must be thoroughly reflected upon, and it must be even considered released entirely. If we embrace conformity, if we embrace that we are not more than simply these five senses and the physiological beings that we have been told we are by materialistic science, we will forfeit internal intuitive knowing. Maybe not immediately, not all at once, but most of society has been told it isn't available to them and that they're special if it happens to be something that they experience from moment to moment. Deja vu. Any paranormal experience with knowing something that you shouldn't know, being cued into a natural disaster before it happens, sensing the spirit in one form or another through the clairs, and not feeling comfortable telling others that it happened because it's extraordinary. What this course is all about is waking us up to the fact that nothing about our intuition is extraordinary. It simply has been untapped, and we're here to awaken it. Trust was a natural state when we were younger. We learned what to say and what not to say within our culture, within our society, within our families, within our school systems. If we can return to a trusting state that our intuition is available to us and that it is always a bond that connects us energetically and can be better understood with quantum models, we can return to using it as a skill set. When we feel disassociated, when we feel separate, when we feel that conformity is the only way to be accepted within a society, and when we learn not to listen anymore to that third chakra inner drive, that inner knowing, that co-creative contribution, isolation and disassociation will always replace our connection. Our values will often become external because it's far too important to be accepted by the masses than it is to be able to trudge out alone, a lone Spartan in the crowd, determined to make it on our own merits, on our own view of an ever-evolving and co-creative plane of existence. And if our values become external, sooner or later we will become what we are told we must become to survive, to provide food, shelter, company, protection, survival, security. And then we begin again to create additional filters to deny the inner resource and the wellspring of intuition that is available to us. It is my firm belief that the false sense of aloneness is the cause of all suffering. The addictions that are rampant in today's society, with the #1 prescribed medication in the Western world and growing into lesser developed communities, is an antidepressant. The second most prescribed medication is a painkiller, often opiates or opioids. When we really examine this, what is it that we are trying to escape from? With the overuse of medicines, the overuse of alcohol, the overuse of plant medicines, and the abuse of medications that could be potentially short-term helpful and life-saving, what we are actually finding is that this false sense of separation, aloneness, and also the loss of ourselves with the excessive amounts of traditional conformity, we take on unnecessary suffering. There is no question that wholeness awaits our awareness. What we have been told that we are, separate, alone, living in a competitive world, and nothing more than a speck of stardust that will be born, that will struggle to live and survive, and will eventually leave whatever legacy we choose to leave behind before we die and become again part of the great void of nothingness, is so far from the truth of our divine, fractalized, exponential potential. We are beings of light, we are eternal beings, and there is nothing disconnected about us, as we will get closer to as we step into some of these quantum models. Science, through quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and even astrophysics, has recently discovered connection is universal. What is beautiful, and in my study of esoteric philosophy, esoteric religion and its scriptural core, its native archaeological core, is that we are part of one thread, one golden mean, one universal force, one infinite creator's creations, both as the creator, individuated, and through the creator. It is fascinating that quantum physics has finally demonstrated through the proper instrumentation that we are all connected as beings, and the ripple effect that we very often feel and that we sense can now be measured and understood. We are one source in dimensional realities. What we can see and what we can experience through the deductive reasoning of our five senses, and what science would use as models that is exclusively materialistic types of models, is actually desperately limiting. What we can see and what materialistic science has been using as a model this entire time turns out to be less than 4.7% of what actually is the measurable universe. The measurable universe is, at this point, depending on which scale you're looking at and which quantum physicist you're speaking to, approximately 73% dark energy, which is simply vital connected energy that has not yet been created into form. It has no matter. Dark matter, again, something we cannot see with our visual acuity through the human eye, cones and rods, is approximately 23%. It has some density, it has some matter, but it isn't something that we see as immediately tangible or available to us. So when you look at luminous matter, as shown in this graph, that is the less than 4.7% of what it is that we consider to be the real world, real matter, what we can see, what we interact with, what we engage with. This is fascinating, and it begs the question, how much influence does that dark matter, 23+%, or that dark energy, 73+%, have that is intelligently impacting or otherwise influencing us? Dark matter and dark energy is further defined. Most of the universe is made up of dark energy, a mysterious force that drives the accelerating expansion of the universe. The next largest ingredient is dark matter, which interacts with the rest of the universe only through its gravity. Normal matter, which we have just discussed, including all the visible stars, planets, and galaxies, and ourselves and everything around us on this globe, makes up less than 5% of the total mass of the universe. Here the chart is slightly different in terms of the percentage of dark energy, dark matter. This is still very much academic in the scientific world, but we're defining what these percentages are so that we can better use these models going forward. We are merged with the dark field. What we can't see is not separate from us. It just isn't something that we've learned how to make usable and determined and constantly tangible to us to better make our movements through this world fluid and decisive. Just as the subatomic particles that compose us cannot be separated from the space and particles surrounding them, so living beings cannot be isolated from each other. This was taken as a quote from Lynn Taggart, but is based on the science of Albert Einstein and particle entanglement. What happens to a particle split on one side of the world and then having its partner moved to the other side of the world will impact its particle entangled twin. We are constantly influencing one another. Our particles are entangled, whether they are seen or unseen. This is part of the quantum models that will soon be regular and academic in every school of teaching, public and private, very shortly. This is a really loaded topic and a very exciting one. Everything imagined exists. I want you to consider mind field. I want you to consider anything you've ever thought of before, and how many thoughts, how many daydreams, how many times even a sleeping dream revealed something to you that you don't recall where the information came from. As a matter of fact, at times you were certain that there was no way you could have thought that thought or dreamed that dream because you couldn't have conceived of its potential. It was too far outside of your range of what is normal, what the universe is actually capable of, or what you would have found interesting enough to have brought it into a dream and an imagined mind field. It is because we share mind field. As I've stated, everything is connected. If someone else thought it, it is in mind field and you can pick up on it. If someone else invented it, innovated it, came up with a visionary concept, it is now in mind field, whether it was brought fully into circulation or not. And that opens the door to third dimension and fourth dimension, the two densities and dimensions that we live in. We'll be talking a little bit more about this as we go forward, but please understand that you're a multidimensional being already. You're already one-dimensional and two-dimensional in density and in dimension. You just don't think or focus from that framework. And when you are awake and when you are focused and you are moving through brainwave states that we'll again go more into throughout this entrainment series, you are moving through different levels of density just within third dimensional boundaries and third dimensional realms. When we are in a dream state, a meditative state, an induced state using some form of anesthesia or plant medicine, we're drunk, we're high, we've hit our head and we're unconscious, we are no longer bound by third dimensional reality. We're experiencing a fourth dimensional reality, and within that fourth dimensional reality, everything exists. And everything is allowed. Creation is absolutely infinite. When we consider everything that we know now and everything that we've imagined through cryptic ideas around mythology and sci-fi and romantic history and some of the greatest inventions that have come forward and are yet to come forward and may already be in existence that are just not currently deployed and available to mainstream society, we have to recognize that creation is infinite, and it is simply waiting to come into form from that 95% of the dark matter, dark energy, into something that we can visually see, into full visual matter and form. What exists in that dark energy? What exists in that dark matter? I would have you be completely open to the fact that the heavenly realm exists there. Many of us have had the veil thin so many times that we've experienced the heavenly realm. We've sensed it, we've tasted it. Perhaps we brought our energy, our boundaries, our resonance up to such a fine-tuned level of grace that we have been able to perforate a space and merge with that heavenly realm. And beings have come closer to us at the edge of that gateway, at the edge of that veil. And we have experienced those that have passed on, perhaps guides, perhaps angelic or heavenly witnesses, perhaps children that are getting ready to be born to us or in our families. It is absolutely my conviction that the heavenly realm exists in that unseen 95%. We have been told since we were children that there is an elemental realm, an elemental kingdom. Many have seen fairies, gnomes, sprites, nature come alive, trees talk to them, the wind whisper messages to them. This has been known throughout every culture, throughout every civilized society, from the beginning of the earth on down. We have heard about beings that are part of a natural realm that seem to slip in and out of our dimensional reality. And we know that if we step into sacred sites that are high vortex areas, we know that if we step inside of a mushroom ring, if we happen to find ourselves in areas of the world where great temples have been built and rebuilt, we know that there are opportunities to slip in and out of dimensionality as it has been recorded and told by the ancients all the way now into modern day. The elemental realm exists in that 95%. And we have to discuss as well that there is a dark realm. If everything is allowed by divine and infinite creator, if the universe, that primal mover, allows for the richness and the tapestry of experience, that all things are permissible for that experience, then the dark realm exists there too. The dark realm would be defined as malevolence. It would be defined as fear-mongering. It would be defined very often as being manipulative or exploitive. It's what terrifies us when we are children and what we build up filters to. It's what allows us to be able to sense deviance in an individual that we have met that wants to have something to do with our lives, but we just get the wrong feeling. It has to do with so much of the paranormal world that we hear about on a regular basis today. And at one point or another, just about every single one of us has sensed it or had a huge amount of direct experience with it. It is my belief in that 95% the dark realm also exists. So let's get into something even bigger. Within these fields, we share multiverses and various iterations of ourselves. It has been made academic if you know where to look. It has been put out through multiple lectures and conventions and opportunities for public speaking that quantum computers have exploited by poking holes in the multiverses, in the parallel realities with which we exist. For every decision you may have made or not made, there is an iteration of you that ran with that agenda into infinity, iterations of yourself. This is actually something that has been stated by those scientists that have led some of the greatest breakthroughs, both for their own purposes and for the deep state, and are currently being employed and utilized for our benefit and sometimes not for our benefit to further understand the impacts and also our relevance in a multisphere. The multiverses can be accessed and exploited very similar to a lot of what sci-fi has shown through Hollywood. There is a lot of belief that so many of the popular films that have been put out there in the world, as well as some of the best sci-fi series, books, and literature that we have tapped into and tipped off many of the great screenwriters, many of the great authors that have captured our attention because it is true and it is demonstratable. Whether you are looking at pop culture or you're looking at peer-reviewed scientific magazines, we have access to more than one reality, more than the third dimensional that we live in on a regular basis with our variant brainwave states, and more than the fourth dimensional that we escape to when we are in a sleep or unconscious state. There are other realms to be stepped into, and there's a tremendous amount of literature that's available, and we'll go into this a bit more. Within these realms, it's important to understand that so much of what we've been told since we were children, and so much that we have sensed because we are lucid to these energetic poles in the world, that there is an interplay, the interplay between realms of consciousness. Our lack of awareness does not prohibit a free will universe from interfering in our co-creative field simply because we are ignorant. All thoughts and feelings are not yours personally. Well, what does this mean? It means so often we'll have a thought and we'll damn ourselves for that thought. We will assume that we are not a good person. We will assume that that was not within our character, and we won't even realize that we're picking up on a thought simply moving through mind field with which we happen to be permeable at the time. Or perhaps beings that see us far more clearly in that dark realm, that have a degree of matter or energetic intelligence in the dark fields of energy, are influencing us at any given point, and we are vulnerable and susceptible to it. How often have you felt vamped by an individual that was determined to come up to you and pull off of your energy resources by creating a provocative or confrontational situation? How often have you felt drained afterward? This is commonly referred to as energy vampirism, and the energy that is sucked off of you or released from your energy field at that time is often called loosh. It's very important to recognize that we are meant to be lucid to those dark realms around us so that we can better manage and even better understand what is impacting us so that we can move about our co-creative zones more freely. We can and are under constant influence and interference. Being aware that this is permissible in a free will universe until we can call in our sovereignty and draw necessary boundaries around our personal energy, we can then determine what we will and will not allow. When patterns are broken, new worlds emerge. Why is this so important? We are in a free will universe. We chose this. We came here rather decidedly. And we'll step more into that choice throughout this entrainment, but please understand, in a free will universe, everything is allowed. We only encounter energies that are a match to our resonant frequency. If we live in a band of fear, we will attract more within that resonant band of fear. If we live in a space of manipulation and malevolence, we will again attract more individuals that are operating and resonating from that band of manipulation and malevolence. However, if our attitude is bright and fearless and joyful and constantly in a state of turning optimism from events that we're feeling beyond our control or not to our own optimal determination, we are going to be stepping up our resonant frequency and using our free will to be far more decisive in our co-creation. This is again so much part of how we use our intuition. We are active co-creators in an infinite field of multiverses and iterations. This is such a vast concept. It can be mind-blowing, but for any of you that have had really deeply powerful meditations using tools that were available for you that might have been hemisync and binaural beats, they may have been using plant medicines, they may have been using sacred sounds and charged environments, vortexes, and high portal energies. You've experienced a taste of those multiverses. You've sensed into the vastness of the iterations of parallel realities with which you exist. When we see everything as fields within fields, and we recognize that we are energy beings first, we recognize then, and we have the power then to co-create at the level that is far more in harmony with our desires. One of the great proficients of our time was Emanuel Swedenborg, who lived from 1688 to 1782. He said, "The origin of evil is the abuse of the abilities proper to us called rationality and freedom. By rationality, I mean the ability to discern what is true and therefore what is false, and to discern what is good and therefore what is evil. By freedom, I mean the ability to freely think, intend, and do such things." This is taken from Divine Love and Wisdom, 264. Let's talk a little bit more about why this is so important. Emanuel Swedenborg first mastered the physical sciences. He was a scholar of psychology and religion, the master of the hypnagogic state to tap into spirit. He expounded on his discoveries through all of his writings, which included 32 religious volumes, including Heaven and Hell. He was non-dogmatic, meaning he did not aspire to a particular religion. He was focused on the underlying thread of all religions. He was later tried as a heretic. His works were banned in Sweden, and he ultimately fell into obscurity. But his work was recently resurrected by many within the mental health realm that understood that so much of what plagues those that are schizophrenic, that are experiencing multiple personality disorder, and other isolating mental health issues are very often because of influence, manipulation, and sensing into dark realms for which science gives them no regard. We experience these realms, the heavenly realm, the elemental realm, the dark realm, and all of these multiverse iterations as phenomena. They can be captured and they can be measured, and it doesn't just take heavy-ended equipment like the Hubble telescope with its special filters, or even quantum computers to be able to determine and see them. All kinds of lower-end measurement data has been used to record paranormal voices, and to be able to film, as is shown here with these orbs, energies that exist slightly out of sync with our third dimensional reality and not immediately visible to the cones and rods in our eyes. These were able to be picked up by regular phone camera filters, and look at how many there are. This is not anything to do with the camera. This has nothing to do with water on the lens or dew in the air. These are a phenomenon that can be seen again and again and narrowed in on with very specific microscopic instrumentation to show that it has a life and a form and an intelligence unto itself, and I would suggest is part of this sentience coming through into our interdimensionality. Many experience NDEs, near-death experiences, OBEs, out-of-body experiences, and altered states of consciousness in meditation, as we have already stated. There is a beautiful fabric of continuity amongst the experiencers about what is seen there. Our knowledge is the power to consciously cohabitate with these dark realms and all the energies that exist both in the dark and in the light fields. Universal laws are in place and can be traced back to our earliest known civilizations, addressing our sovereignty. So important to understand our sovereignty. Our lack of knowledge, application, and silence is equal to admission. When we do not understand our sovereignty, we subjugate it unconsciously very often, and thereby the laws and the universal concepts of free will are then able to make inference or manipulate or otherwise harass us because we have not claimed our sovereignty. Our great awakening is necessary and essential to our human evolution. Waking up to your latent abilities is literally the reclamation of your sovereignty. It is the breath of life that you took when you were born into this body, and being born and breathed anew as a spiritual being, claiming the body that you are in and recognizing that you get to determine who influences, who confronts, who manipulates, who is involved and who is not, because it is your eternal choice. It is your divinity embodied, and it is for you to co-create with whom you resonate. Our active participation in requesting assistance is required of the light realms. The dark realms know that they need your permission, but they will very often do it in tricky and manipulative ways. in a sleep state, in a drunken state, an unconscious state, in a state with which you are not in your power, and you will be asked in one form or another for them to be able to influence you. The light realms always ask you to ask for direct assistance from them. They seek permission. All scripture, all esoteric philosophy touches on this. They are never going to impose themselves into your free will zone. So, anything you ask in faith, nothing wavering. We are often told, knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Think about everything you've ever heard throughout your lifetime from some of the greatest walks of philosophical faith and leanings and understanding, and you will remember that heaven or the eternities that are a part of that light realm are always seeking to have some form of benevolent involvement in our lives, but we must first ask. And now maybe something that you had never heard about, but the ancients have known since the beginning of time and have repeatedly left clues for us all throughout ancient archaeology, throughout ancient philosophical texts, and has come up again and again and is part of what those elite that run many of our systems have been prepared for quite some time. And it's called the Great Year. Let's talk a little bit more about the implications and what it means. The Earth's Great Year has 12 zodiac ages. The Great Year is approximately 25,800 year cycle with 12 zodiac subcycles or ages of 2,150 years each. The shift of the age of Aquarius is in transition now. We are ending the age of Pisces and starting the age of Aquarius. In simple terms, the age of Pisces saw the rise of Christianity, and the age of Aquarius is defined by the unified truth and brotherhood. No one agrees on the exact beginning and date of all of these ages, but what you will find, if you are a studier as I am of archaeology and of mythology and ancient esoteric texts, you will find not only evidence that this has been understood throughout some of our more defined civilizations such as the Incas and the Aztecs, the Egyptians, ancient mystery schools. Even if you are visiting the Hoover Dam, you will find that there is a very beautiful facade made fully of granite that demonstrates this great, quote, sidereal year, as they express it, and demonstrates every single one of the movements of the planets, each of the zodiacs, and the fact that it is an age for a massive shift in human evolution. There, if you are and have been or intend to go, keep your eye out for the two brass statues with wings ascended to heaven and their arms raised with them. Very fascinating that this would have been something that would have been spent with tax dollars at the Hoover Dam if it was not of great significance to our leaders. Cosmic changes affect us and our solar system. So as we go through this great year, something that happens with great regularity is that there are additional waves, frequencies, new resonancy bands, and other subtle forces or very powerful forces that we move through. Our entire solar system moves through while we're in this great elliptical shift in the Milky Way galaxy. Many of you have seen a vision of where we're supposed to be in the Milky Way galaxy as a constant, but that was never true science, and unfortunately most of us were misinformed. As we move, we are impacted, not only as a planet, and not only our sun, but our entire solar system. Every planet is experiencing something that we now call interplanetary climate change. As I stated before, we are told that this was a constant. You are here. How many of us have seen this poster in an astronomy class or in a class that tried to help you get a greater concept of the physical sciences? This is actually a stagnant view of where we were about 12,800 years ago. The approximate cycle, as we've stated, and again, it's give or take a little bit, 25,800, 25,900 year cycle. This is a galactic map. It is one that is just meant to give you a spatial reckoning of where we have been and where we are now. The pinpoint at the top is actually to show you, if you follow that line, is to demonstrate that this is actually where we are now, at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, where you see that light emanating. All esoteric philosophy is in agreement of an end by fire. It's a solar flash. I have studied this thoroughly, and I have lived around the world. I have studied abroad in Jerusalem and all over the Fertile Crescent, also known as the Middle East. And I will tell you that in my 40+ years, this has been a constant. It doesn't matter whether it is Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, the Hermetics, Sumerians, Egyptians, Gnostics, Essenes, Christianity, Kabbalah, Islam, Sufism, Native American legends, and endless discoveries in archaeology and sacred texts all agree. I was even recently in Marseille in France and was looking up at the most beautiful cathedral at the top of the hill that Marseille is known for. And there, depicted in glorious, glorious paint and stucco, is an image of the first end of a year or end of a cycle, the first flooding of the earth that changed that age and era. And then it depicts that there is a change by fire, and its subsequent image is actually a stairway to heaven, which is representative in all of my studies of a form of human evolution or ascension. So the solar flash triggers dimensionality graduation in our planetary sphere. Human evolution is an eternal and universal constant. It is part of what the one infinite creator always intended. There was a devolution from that one infinite creator, from that oneness, from that source code, from the one and all connection that we are a part, and we devolved into these fractalized addresses that came all the way down into what we call third dimension and fourth dimension. As I stated, we already exist in first and second dimension, but those are less conscious states. We are actively focused on a third and fourth dimensional realm. As part of our natural evolution, our soulful evolution, we are meant to evolve back towards that absolute through many different densities and spheres within densities and dimensions. And this is part of what we're experiencing now. And the Earth is looking to shift with us. In fact, she is one of the driving forces as she is being impacted by these wave frequencies coming from the galactic central sun as our solar system has moved so close to the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Dimensional density and conscious upgrades within ourselves. How many people are noticing the level of angst and frenetic energy that is going on all over this planet? We have had literally half the species die off on this planet, and it appears to be almost self-sanctioned. There are whales that are beaching themselves. There are mass migratory birds that are not returning and are not nesting. We've had a diminishment of sea life. There has just been such a tremendous shift in what is staying and what is not staying while we are going through this shift. Similarly, human beings are experiencing this frenetic energy. And when the Earth has her own heartbeat or her own homeostasis frequency, which is known as the Schumannic resonance, and is approximately 7.8 hertz in a resting stasis, all of sentient life on her has to calibrate or find themselves equally in homeostasis with that. There has been a tremendous shift in what her frequency is, and with that, we are forced to reset our frequency. Her frequency is spiking upward, not downward, which then also behooves each of us to reset or to realign and to ascend into a higher homeostatic frequency. I do promote so much literature out there, as well as good viewing. Wisdom Teachings, that has been available on Gaia TV, is able to encapsulate in such a succinct way all that I am sharing with you here, and be able to give you what has taken me decades in education to understand, to actually bring the science relevant, the esoteric philosophy and wisdom, as well as the common dialogue that's important for every single one of us. One of my very most promoted episodes is the Book of Enoch and the Solar Flash. So this is a rendering that is from ancient esoteric scriptural teachings and is part of some of the great prophets' visions of the Ascension and some of the symbology associated. All esoteric spiritual philosophy, wisdom teachings have always known that we have descended and we are meant to ascend again. We have heard biblically and scripturally about wheels within wheels, about Jacob's ladder, about all of the ascended angels, the hierarchy of heaven, the master teachers and guides, and the ascended beings that are part of this great shift for humanity. All of this has been common and repeated again and again. Now we have to take a very decided turn to be aware that while there is a natural evolution for humanity, there are many that have had great power for quite some time on this earth that for the most part, while it was set up to be neutral for each of us to be able to choose how we wanted to run our energy, whether we wanted to work towards growth or destruction, benevolence or malevolence, there are many that have known and maintained some of their knowledge beyond the veil and have not necessarily kept the most clean agendas and have had too much power driving humanity into an artificial form of evolution. With this comes the important need to understand how far we've already come in 2018. Powers that be have agendas with wheels in motion. Their vision for our collective future is one of technology-driven, AI, and quantum computer-run societies with enhancements to all our current systems and even our bodies that we may not be aware of. Please take the time to study D-Wave and how long ago its founder, Geordie Rose, put forth a plan and an intention to use quantum computers within the deep state, within NASA, within Silicon Valley, and with many black op programs that we have no say or ability to regulate in, that have been collecting data on every individual, on every soul, for, I believe at this point, somewhere between 12 to 15 years already. This is so important for each of us to know. This isn't theoretical science. This is passé. We have already achieved it and we've already gone deeper. CERN is a Hadron Collider in Switzerland. Some of you may have heard of it before. Let me tell you a little bit about what that means. This particle colliding quantum field producing mega technology is responsible for discovering what researchers called the God particle, or Higgs boson, named after the scientists that discovered it. It is 15 to 17 miles long, capable of creating multiple singularities of unstable space and time. There is a lot of scientific query around all that CERN is capable of and all that it was intended for and maybe is used or misused for. But when you consider the fact that sending one particle one direction in this 15 to 17 mile radius and a particle in the other, so that once they meet in that central point, that they collide with one another and shatter for the point of creating and opening into a wormhole, into a space, a temporal space-time continuum, and then naming it the God particle is truly not to be misunderstood as a profound shift in the fabric of space-time and how it can impact each of us on this particular timeline, what implications it has, where it may affect our realities as we are co-creating in this parallel universe. And as you study D-Wave and CERN, you will come to find that there has been a great deal of arrogance and communication to the public rather candidly, that by using these technologies, they have been able to quote-unquote exploit the parallel universes and be able to pull resources out of another timeline or multiple timelines where you and I exist, living and having different choices, and bringing them into this timeline for the elite that choose to exploit and use those resources. This is very important for each of us to understand as we are making choices moving forward. There is a concern about CERN's impact on our space-time and the multiverse distortions. We already have something that is called the Mandela effect, named after Nelson Mandela. There is within this timeline in reality multiple versions of memory by the public, by our society, that do not agree with one another. They are separate timelines of memory. And what we've come to find is things that were very important in pop culture, in marketing, in media, in movies that have defined us, in lyrics to songs, and even in our ancient scriptures. There are permanent shifts that have taken place that do not agree with the memories of the vast majority of our population. So that would mean not that someone's hacked the internet, not that someone has brainwashed you. It means that someone has had access to our space-time, our timelines, and the power to be able to change them, even though you are still conscious as divine sentience of an original memory thread and theme. Those running these programs have designs for our merging with technology. We have heard this from the late Stephen Hawking. We've heard this from Elon Musk. We've heard Sam Harris, the philosopher, discuss this. In the exact words of Elon Musk, they're summoning the demon. Artificial intelligence, according to Geordie Rose, by his own design of now Kindred after he left D-Wave, is to make machines, AI, artificial intelligence, that can do everything. And he emphasized everything, not computing, not data crunching, not robotics. Every single thing that human beings are capable of to do them better than us. And so we already are looking at neural lace, we're looking at implants, we're looking at cyborg implementations to our bodies, and this is a very powerful driving force of many and great areas of power within our elite systems that are looking to create their form of human evolution. So the propaganda has been very popular. We already have areas in the world where you can get an implant in your hand and be able to use it as a credit card or to unlock doors to get into your employer, to be able to claim payment checks. We already know that our devices have gotten smarter and that the idea of being able to integrate this level of intelligence and virtual reality through our movies and our themes and games has been meant to entice this younger generation in particular. They don't know what it was like to not have a device in their hands. It has been a huge part of their day-to-day entrainment and the history as they recall it. So watch the agendas. The agendas are very compelling. Neural lace is going to be a very, very popular implementation of the future. Having certain body parts available to be cloned and replaced and have smart tech involved in them, and nanotechnology is all part of the upcoming implementations. Studies have shown, unfortunately, that with all of what it takes to be in 2018, in this world of social media, in this world of tech before humanity, it has created and shown that there is addiction and further isolation. In a time where we couldn't be closer to one another and more available, we feel more separate. Why is that, and how is that impacting us? Our future is still undecided, and it requires our input. In an era where there is so much need for discernment, so much need to tap into our latent abilities that are part of our DNA, that supposed junk DNA that is over 90%, that appears to not, according to our geneticists, have any real purpose, that 90% of our brains that we're told that we don't actually use or utilize and that we don't have access to. This is all part of this human evolutionary journey that each and every single one of us are on. There is a natural route to it that looks like the stimulation of organic matter, that looks like the lightening of vibration of these carbon-based bodies that we're in into more of a crystalline or silicon-based body if you follow the history and the science as well as the esoteric mysteries. And if we didn't choose deliberately to move into refining that vibration, riding on this beautiful globe, this beautiful earth that is going through this ascension movement, that it is part of its natural evolution, and it is seeking to bring many of us with her as she shoots up in her shamanic resonance from 7.8 hertz past 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and sustainably higher for hours and hours at a time, just to get us used to what that could feel like to ping into higher resonance as we soften our resets. We must recognize that it is a choice that we need to consciously make to use that discernment. Will we evolve naturally and as we were divinely ordained to, or will we allow ourselves through unconsciousness and by subjugating our sovereignty to the elites that run so much of what is going on this planet to determine how we will evolve and on their artificial pace? We are at the end of a cycle. I say with complete and total conviction, we're at the end of a third dimensional cycle. It doesn't mean that third dimension doesn't exist anywhere else in the universe, multiverses, and multi-timelines. It does. It always will. It means that you came here at this time, at this unique peak time in human history, and you chose to be here as starseed, as way showers, light workers, light warriors, or maybe you are just an Earthian that was really excited to have this be the final Earth life that you had, and you too are ready to make the choice to ascend and experience the fullness and the fruition of your evolution. It is here, it is now, and only by claiming our latent intuition can we have the proper tools to discern. All the mystics and the philosophers globally knew. Just a little journey. This is a Tibetan image of what their rendition of light body meant, which is to become a body of light, a body that is meant to be this full spectrum of the rainbow. Rainbow body, light body. Isn't it beautiful? This is a coalition or a mosaic of so much of the beautiful artwork that is, again, touching on human evolution and what all ancient mystery schools have always known. You're going to see Christian mysticism. You're going to see Gnostic mysticism. You will see here a lot to do with Buddhism and Hinduism and Jainism. All of them understand that there is a practical application and even a very specific direction on how we go about ascending, and it is shown beautifully and depicted here. Spirit children must mature and evolve. We cannot stay spiritually children, spiritually blind, and still completely encompassed in a veil. It is for us to challenge the veil, push the boundaries of the veil, and find permeations in that thin veiling so that we can continue to recover, reclaim, and fully embody the fullness of what we are, fractalized divinity. We must integrate the multiverses, which is quite a wild ride. I'll tell you now, to integrate is to look at yourself deeply, do all of the shadow work necessary to fully own who you are in this sphere, in this particular iteration of yourself, and then release all that no longer serves you and integrate aspects that have not been loved and fully owned. When we achieve that singular level of integration, you will begin to notice that whether in meditation, dream time, altered states of consciousness, or even in full awakeness, in alpha or a beta state, you will start to sense your multidimensionality. You may meet versions of yourself that live in other parallel realities. You may examine yourself as you are now and be able to peer into some of those realities where you also exist and see how did some of the choices that you didn't make in this reality fare for you in some of those other realities. It's quite fascinating, and it is part of your accepting the wild and expansiveness that truly is your divine nature. And it is not a singular individuation. It is definitely a multiplicitous level of self. Here is our next evolutionary iteration. This was beautifully done by a friend of mine named Bruce Herman. This is meant to demonstrate that we started out in that third dimensional reality as a very dense, heavy, and not entirely conscious level of self. And through growth and multiple iterations and multiple opportunities for embodiment, all in a 3D sphere, we are meant to step back into and claim our full light body, our full divinity, our full and complete DNA, as well as access to our brains. And this is demonstrated here in this beautiful iteration with the final light body that is more crystalline and less carbon. The Earth seeks to evolve with us into its next dimensional cycle of expansion. There is a lovingly, very broadcast release that is going on within this awakening community, that we need to lovingly allow the 3D Earth, the 3D Gaia, to pass on. We are seeing so many Earth changes. We are witnessing epic and unprecedented impacts to our sphere in tropical storms and hurricanes, in earthquakes and seismic activity, in volcanoes and tsunamis, and as I've said, a massive die-off not only of the planetary life that is the animal kingdom, but also forests and seas and coral reefs. We are moving into the 5th D, the 5th density, 5th dimension, Earth Gaia. As I've stated, we are already part of third and fourth. Fourth is the dream state, the unconscious state, where everything exists just as it is possible for it to exist in 3D. But we are only going to just move through that fourth dimension and into a fifth dimension where we begin to see the earth in all the ways that we have heard prophesied since the beginning of time, which is to move into her perfected version, her ecclesiastical or celestialized state. We are divine co-creators, and we need to see past the destruction, past the human turmoil, past the wars, past the deceit, past corrupt politics. For us to be able to see the level of humanity and the restoration of divine order, we have to be co-creators and start to redream and envision it together. And that's the next exciting piece, and that is the next step as we reclaim and use the discernment of our latent intuitive abilities. We become much more clear channels, much more clear co-creators, and we bond together in a co-creative community. So as we've already stated, conscious awareness unlocks this potential. We are here to awaken ourselves to the reminder that we've always known. The door is there. Knock, turn the handle, open it. With your conscious awareness, all potential is made available to you. That is the end of this pre-training portion of our entrainment. It is meant to give you a deep dive perspective of what is going on now in this Earth iteration, in this timeline in 2018. This is current material. There is so much more that could have been shared in this material, but it is important that you be able to grasp things in sound bites, line upon line, precept on precept, until you are able to fully encapsulate why it is essential to be awake and aware and discerning that there are choices to be made, and there truly are divergent paths of artificial human evolution that is being crafted and being put in front of us with quite an agenda, or we can reintegrate into the esoteric wisdom that has been on this earth and is part of your cellular memory, and it is unquestionably a part of your spiritual memory and recognizance that you are evolving. All of us can feel it. All of us get to make that choice, and as we step into the latent intuition, we will be able to do so. So I encourage you to move forward with this course. I encourage you to truly grasp it with both hands and see that there is nothing that limits you as the fractalized and the truly unlimited divinity that you are. And I thank you for having the courage to do so, and I'm excited and so honored to join you in this ride. Thank you. Let's begin.